I really want to treat this as a conversation. I am Councilor Campbell. I'm the newly elected District 4 City Councilor, which covers Mattapan, Dorchester, a little bit of Jamaica Plain and Roslindale. And tonight's discussion is really about the body camera issue and the pilot program. And it's an opportunity for us to particularly hear from the public their ideas, their thoughts, their concerns related to that project or that pilot program. Before I sort of jump in, I want to acknowledge Councilor McCarthy, who is the Vice Chair of the Committee on Public Safety and Criminal Justice, which is the committee I chair. McDevitt, Jack McDevitt from Roxbury, who is speaking on behalf of the Social Justice Task Force, but there are other members in the room who are part of the Social Justice Task Force. So if you could quickly just stand up, say your name, your affiliation.
I am Reverend Mark Scott. I'm the Associate Pastor of the Azusa Christian Community, which is located in Dorchester, Four Corners, and I live in Dorchester.
I am Susan Young, and I live in Hyde Park, a long life residence. I've been here for 18 years and 3 years in Rossi. So I'm here with you.
Josh.
Hi, I'm Josh Doan. I'm a public defender with the Committee for Public Counsel Services.
And other social justice task force members may trickle in. Some are not able to attend this evening, so they may also attend the community meeting we have scheduled for tomorrow or on Thursday. I also want to acknowledge Councilor Michelle Wu, Council President Michelle Wu, who's in the room. I know some other councilors will also join us later, as well as some other state electeds who care about this issue deeply. I want to thank you all for being here. I also want to thank my staff, which I don't think happens enough, for coordinating this effort. I also want to acknowledge BPD, many of whom are in the room. And this is an opportunity not only for you to engage with us, but for the very end of the meeting. The body camera issue, obviously, we know is very important. It's very important to many residents in the city of Boston. As the chair of the Public Safety Committee, one of the first things that was important for me and Councilor McCarthy to do was to host community meetings that were in the public to specifically talk about this issue. And to do it in such a way where it was informal, not in a formal hearing process. We will do that as well next week. But to actually have this type of conversation where it's us taking notes, taking your thoughts, your ideas, and then bringing it back to shape policy. There was no body camera policy defined by BPD yet. So this is truly the beginning of the community process. We might actually have a few more community meetings, so I won't take up too much time, but I want to lay that groundwork and framework that we're here to listen and to do less of the talking. So I will turn it over to Councilor McCarthy to say a few words to Jack.
I will be with all these microphones. I thought we were going to talk about Tom Brady, but we'll get into the board. I think it's such an important issue for us as a council to address, and certainly represented so well by Boston Police Department. Boston Police Department, I would argue, is the greatest police department in the world. I would also, it's really not arguable that they're the greatest at community policing in the world. They set the standards for community policing in the United States. Having said that, as this pilot program begins, I'm hoping that this is another tool in the toolbox for the Boston Police to continue their good work and utilize this tool in the proper way. I would also say that, as Councilor Campbell stated, that there are some issues that need to be addressed as we start to roll this out. Social justice issues, protection for the police, as well as protection for the citizens. And as we start to dot these I's across these T's, as this program begins to take shape, we're going to do it once and we're going to do it right. And that's what this is all about. And I congratulate Councilor Campbell for having this forum, for getting out in front of this issue and staying out in front of this issue. And it's important to hear from not only the police and not only the proponents of body cameras, but also the neighbors in our neighborhood. We're a very active community in and around Southwest Boston. And I'm very happy to split some of Roslindale with you. And it's important to hear from the people who this could positively or negatively affect. So I'm looking forward to hearing both sides of the issue and some thoughts and concerns of the people in this room. So thank you.
I'm going to turn it over to Jack, not only to tell you a little bit about himself and possibly other social justice task force members, but to begin to talk about what has been determined. Something as simple as we are doing a pilot program, it is happening, it is coming to the city of Boston. but some other logistics that have been determined, we will also speak to. And before the end of the night, there is a one-pager that's going around for people to take with them on some of those things that have been determined that you can share widely. And if you have follow-up questions, of course, you can contact my office at any time or Councilor McCarthy's office at any time.
Thanks so much. Again, my name is Jack McDevitt. I'm Associate Dean for Research and Graduate Studies at Northeastern University in the School of Criminology and Criminal Justice. And I've been working with the city, with the police department in the city of Boston for about 35 years on different projects. I think the mayor and the police commissioner had invited a group of us, those you met tonight and some others, to start meeting regularly as this rolled out and starting in January, to sort of say, this is a complicated process. It's not just putting cameras on police officers. It's thinking about their rights and thinking about all of our rights as the community and how that plays out, how do we balance those two. So gave us some information from other cities that have been trying it, some information from Justice Department agencies that have looked at this, and have started to see some ways that we could do this in a way that we really learned from the pilot how to do it right as we roll it out, if we roll it out to a full-time application. So I think that a couple of the other things I wanted to mention, that some of the other people that couldn't be here and may come later and maybe at the subsequent meetings from the Social Justice Task Force include Reverend Jack Ahern from South Boston, Michael Curry from the NAACP, Danielle Williams from Urban League. We've had a pretty good cross-section of folks who've been meeting regularly to try to start to deal with some of these numbers. And I will say one of the things that's been really positive is the police commission, the police department has listened to the task force in terms of recommendations. What the plan is now is to roll out 100 cameras on officers as part of the pilot. Originally the number was 50 and the Social Justice Task Force said, I think it would be better if we did it with double that number, and the police commissioner said that's great. And so that is going to be 100 cameras that get rolled out. And they're going to be rolled out not just in one section of the city, but across the city, and in a series of different neighborhoods. And the other thing that's going to happen, and I'll stop talking and we can listen and have a conversation about it, is that there is going to be Dr. Anthony Braga is going to be heading up an evaluation of it to look at, the deployment of the cameras and has it decreased police misconduct. Has it increased police arrests? Has it impacted crime in neighborhoods? And also, has it changed the dynamic of how we as community members talk to police and how police interact with us? And so that's the evaluation that's going to be part of this 6-month pilot program to sort of see, okay, how is it affecting the city, and what lessons can we learn so when we roll it out full, it's learning from the best practices.
So thank you for that. I want to acknowledge Councilor Ayanna Presley, who's also joined us, and thank you for being here. And I will continue to do that as elections come in. But I want to sort of jump in and to start by listening to the folks in the room. I think we have ample time to do that. And I also want people to understand that I'm a stickler for respecting folks' time, so we try to start on time, we try to end on time. So if certain things aren't addressed, this is a continuing conversation. My staff is here, our contact information is here, so if there's thoughts or remarks that you want to send to the committee, to send to us, and you want to do it via email, snail mail, however you want to do it, please follow up and please do so. But we'll sort of go by a show of hands and jump right in. Don't all raise your hand at once. And if you can say your name, so we know.
Hello, my name is Shika Babin. I'm a grad student at UMass. And so thank you for holding this forum. My first question I wanted to ask was, what's taken us so long to really pursue the implementation of body cameras in Boston? There was initial first no, a couple of years ago, even last year, from the mayor and as well as for Commissioner Evans. What's really changed to make this a priority for us, for all of our safety, not just for the police, but for the community as well? Can you just share?
So I will say, there are many folks in the room who advocated for body cameras and have been for a really long time. Whether they're sitting in front of you, or they're behind you. And I think electeds as well, there was a push and there were hearings before I even joined the council, and Councilor McCarthy didn't want to jump in. Before I joined the council, talking about this issue, and because of the advocacy from many stakeholders and community members, they decided to do it. So I think now we're in this space of how do we do it and how do we do it correctly and how do we develop the best policy that's reflective of best practices nationally, but also best practices of just lay folks, people who actually care about this issue and have thoughts and concerns related to it. So this is the beginning of that conversation. I fully support, like I said, the pilot program. I campaigned on it. So for me, it's about, okay, now that we know we're going to do this and we've allotted some money in the budget for it, let's get to doing it. And so this is the beginning conversation to hear from you, your thoughts, your concerns as to what we should consider at the table when developing that policy. But I don't know if Councilor McCarthy wants to sort of add more. He was actually at the council.
Yeah, I think for me as a council, I can only speak for me, not for BPD or the social justice or anybody, but just for me, I think you want to lay it out once, you want to do it right the first time around. And I think that the conversation that's been happening with Jack and this whole team has been a great effort to make sure that we start to move in that right direction.
So if there is additional sort of follow-up or what you would like to see us think about as we define and shape this policy, please let us know. Please continue to add to the conversation. And if there was probably less people, we would probably have done it almost in a circle fashion, but here we are.
I think that the goal now is to get it rolled out as soon as we can, and I think the hope now is sort of early June to have them all deployed across the city and, you know, start to learn what we can learn from that. So I believe that we're, you know, there are complications that we read in the newspaper. We're still, you know, the police department is still working with you to figure out exactly how to roll these out. But, you know, the fact is that there's a commitment to do this now, so. Good.
Do the cruisers all have cameras? The police cars, do the cruisers all have cameras?
No, that one place they do.
Any have cameras?
Not now. Come on.
Good evening, everybody.
And feel free to take some time. It's not, you have to speak a little bit longer.
So my name is Shigan. I'm a co-organizer of the Boston Police Camera Action Team, and we're happy that this forum is happening. I had a couple of questions for you, sir. You mentioned that you were looking at other cities in terms of policy and program. I was wondering which cities those were. And I was also wondering if you're allowed or able to share details of the policy that you've been crafting with the commissioner. We had the opportunity to work with the ACLU, with Harvard Blood Boston Association, Digital Court, and other groups on a policy ourselves, which I have consulted. So I was wondering what the details of the policy would be if you or the commissioner or others have had a chance to look at the policy that we crafted, and then I guess we can go from there. Thank you.
Sure.
And thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks, and I'd love to see it. I don't know if I have the most recent version of it, but a couple of the communities that have had some influence on this is Las Vegas. Las Vegas seems to have a pretty good policy, and they shared it with us. And then the police department went down to New York City to do a site visit down there to see how that was rolling. They're rolling out a pilot there. And they had, how many cameras?
54.
They had 54. Now, just to give you context, New York City has 35,000 police officers, and they had 54 cameras in their pilot. Boston has 2,100 police officers, and we're going to try it with 100 as our pilot. So I think that you know, a pilot is just a starting point, but you know. And then I don't think we have a policy yet, but we have lots of questions about what should be in the policy. You know, when should a camera be turned off? I know that the ACLU's position nationally, I don't know about this one, is that where there's a heightened expectation of privacy, such as in a home, the camera should be turned off. And so those are the things we've been having conversations together with the command staff of the Boston Police Department, Social Justice Task Force, to get some of those things worked out. Same as some of the questions you would have in your policy, how long would it be available for, who could see it, all of those things are things that haven't been worked out, but have been discussed, you know, to try to get a feeling for where people feel about that.
Sir,
And
for clarification, Social Justice Task Force also accompanied us to New York.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you. And so just to chime in there, so I have a copy of, and I think it's the policy that ACLU also is supporting, that you're mentioning of in the folder, which I think I have a copy of, our office has a copy of. And we have a folder of not only that policy, other policy thoughts and ideas based on trips that BPD took to New York, Las Vegas. The lay person who emailed us and said, I care about this issue, particularly the retention piece, so here's my thoughts. The Dorchester resident who said, I care about the privacy piece, but I don't want officers coming in my home, particularly under certain circumstances. So the goal is to continue to compile that information, put that in the folder, bring it to these conversations, these discussions, and as we're developing stuff, bring that back. So when we have, say, a follow-up hearing, for example, bringing back the policies to say, you did this in the retention space, which may adopt some of the thoughts of ACLU, which may adopt some of the thoughts from a layperson. We did this, and this is how we came to this conclusion as to retention for this policy.
Hi, I'm Shakia Scott. I am the other co-organizer of the of BPCAT, Boston Police Camera Action Team. No problem. And I just had some questions in regards to the 100 officers that would be outfitted. Do we know how many of them and which communities they would be in?
Not yet.
Not yet.
I will say this. We've been in conversation about those 100 cameras not being just in Dorchester, Mattapan, and Roxbury, because we heard from numerous folks that we need to expand this. And so, for example, our meeting tomorrow is in Charlestown, and that's intentional, to be able to expand the pilot program and also be able to compare different neighborhoods.
Exactly. And my other question was, is it voluntary for the officer to wear the body camera in the pilot program?
Yes.
So,
It is voluntary.
Yes, that's, right now, we're gonna ask volunteers, and the volunteers in other cities that have done this, has been plenty of volunteers to come forward. We expect the same here. And then, again, I'm a geeky academic statistician, I apologize.
That's okay.
But what the plan is to match, of all the volunteers, half of them have cameras and half of them don't, so we can measure the activity of both groups and see what the impact is on those that have cameras versus those that don't. So that's our hope and part of the evaluation that we're doing.
Okay.
and I will say, if Reverend Scott's going to add something to that question.
I think it would be, this is something to get good feedback on. So in our conversations, we thought it'd be good to, as the council said, certainly include Charlestown, like East Boston, not just Roxbury. But I think one other question is which units, right? So should it focus more on the Youth Violence Strike Force, where you have a lot of the interaction and a lot of the stops that happen, particularly in more difficult kind of situations? Or should it also be sort of spread among the district officers? So that's something I think community folk need to really be thinking about and commenting on.
Absolutely.
And one of the things I thought was disappointing about New York is they did it as a voluntary, which is why it's 54, right? So,
Given a state of that size.
right.
Right, and so my concern with the voluntary, I'm sorry, was that with the concerns that people have and the complaints that people make, maybe the officers that volunteer for this won't fall into that category. So the data that you retrieve from the voluntary officers that use this may be biased to how that officer performs overall. So it may be a thing that, it may not be a good and bad officer type thing, but it may be more so that good officers come forward to say, hey, I will wear this body camera, and bad officers will say, well, I'm not gonna wear it because I don't have to, and then you won't see that data reflected in the pilot program, which is the data that you are trying to retrieve to make sure that these are working properly.
And one thing about that is that we will have, as part of the department's made available to us, the complaint history of all the officers, both the officers in the program and the officers who aren't in the program. And so we'll be able to see if in fact you're right, only officers with no history of complaints or volunteering and that would tell us something about how to roll it out. I think we would have the same concern you have.
Perfect. Thank you.
Would you consider saving the cameras for the people with the most complaints? You get so many complaints, you win a camera? Well, I mean, it's, if you're just getting the good police, you're kind of skewing the outcome. Whereas if you give it to the 20 most complaints, then you might get a different outcome.
Josh, you want
So I think it might help to explain what it means to pilot it. Because I know I was confused about this until it was explained. Because I think that gets at this issue that you're not going to catch all the bad cops in a pilot.
Right, and the pilot isn't, it's 6 months, and it isn't gonna tell us, all of the cases of misconduct that occur in the city. We won't have enough cameras to cover all of that. But what we will learn is when to turn the camera on and off. When do officers experience that as a difficult situation? Are people not coming to the offices to tell them certain things about crimes because they're afraid to be on camera? One part of the evaluation is to speak with the officers who have the cameras, the officers who are working with them but don't have the cameras, and community members who've interacted with the police to see about, has this changed the pattern of how you interact? Have people come forward more because they feel that if something were to happen, now it's on film and they feel safer about that? But those are all the sort of issues that the police commissioner asked us to sort of use the pilot to help to figure out. And it won't be something that will in that 6 months, we'll get all the cases of misconduct that occur in the city. But the other thing that will happen is we'll be able to look at whether or not there are other forms of, cameras are one form, but there are so many other cameras in the city that are around, and are those cameras picking up misconduct as well? So far you've seen lots of cases of misconduct on camera, and none of them have been from police cameras. And so the question is, how much of that is being picked up in other kinds of private cameras or city cameras or other kinds of video?
I want to acknowledge Councilor Nisa Sabi-George for joining us, and who's going to co-facilitate with me in the Dorchester meeting Thursday. But also, this is an opportunity. So we don't have all the answers to all the questions that are coming up. And I think that's important to recognize that as some of these questions arise, and these are great points, that we make sure to hear from you, to take these thoughts. And we don't have all the answers, and some of these very much may be questions that have to be posed as we continue the conversation. So I want to just interject that as well. I also want to acknowledge Rep. Holmes, who is here as well. Thank you for being here.
I was just going to say something that what the gentleman said and what Shakia had said. My name is Carl Williams of the American Civil Division of Massachusetts. And the way I understand this conversation and the way the issue of body cameras has come up is about explicitly police accountability. It's about looking for, hopefully not hiding, but looking for and hopefully stopping issues of police misconduct, sometimes police brutality, and understanding that those exist, and those are things that we need to work to stop in our society. And that's the reason that we're having cameras on, is that, and that a voluntary program, that seems a difficult way to look at, if that's the goal. A voluntary program, as Shakia was saying, is not gonna very likely match that, right? It's like trying to test to see if the refrigerator light's on every time you open the door. Oh, look, it's on, you close the door. That's not a good study, right? So I think, are we dealing with the refrigerator door problem?
Well, I'll have you, so as we look at least from the council and the committee side, the body cameras aren't solely just for that purpose. I think that is one major purpose that they will serve, and I think that is one of the major reasons why the conversation was sparked in the first place. But for me, if you have a really robust pilot program, at the end of it, we should also have some data that points to it not only being useful for civilians, but also it being useful even for officers. So I think it's more than sort of one, I think it's, the objective is not just that one. The goal is not just that one, so.
The thing that I said, I think everyone would agree that is a very useful thing for officers. And I don't know what the other useful thing is. To find people who migrate rules or laws is a useful thing for officers, right?
Right, so from I was just sort of elaborating, it sounded as if the purpose is just, as you were articulating it, one side is looking for some police misconduct, brutality, anything along those lines, and being able to use the cameras as evidence of that, to then take some action, whether it's legal, policy changes, whatever. But on the flip side, also we're having conversations with police officers, particularly police officers who may not be excited about body cameras, to say the body camera could also be useful for you as an officer, to say, in this instance, for example, this is what happened, I wasn't the aggressor, or whatever it is. So just pulling that apart a little bit.
And just to follow up, and please follow members of the task force address this as well. You're right, the camera issue came to light around police accountability and how we can hold officers accountable who engage in misconduct. But there are multiple other issues that spun out of that, and that's what we're struggling with now. One is it's a police training tool, and it's an amazing police training tool. I had done some work with cameras in Rhode Island, and if you watch how officers conduct traffic stops, they do things that are outside of officer safety. They put themselves in front of the car. They're rude, you know, and so you can address that when you have that in film. It's not like somebody said that they heard this about you. You have it in film, you can do training around it. And then the bigger issue that came up to all of us and we're all struggling with is, what about my privacy as a person who's going to be interacting with a police officer? If my son comes up to a police officer to talk to him about a concern they have about someone in the neighborhood, is that going to be available to people, that tape to be available to people to use that? If there's a car stop and everybody in the car is on video, is that going to be something that's available to anybody who wants to subpoena it? Is the history of different kinds of interactions going to be available? And that's why, you know, I think we really have to sort of see how this is being used by everybody. Because we all have rights of privacy and an expectation of privacy in different kinds of settings. And that's part of what we need to understand as well, is who's going to be asking, is this going to be something in a divorce case, that people subpoenaing tapes of people in a divorce case? Are they going to be doing that with someone's going into a house and they keep the tape rolling and that's all available now? Those are all questions that we're part of the pilot to try to see how to address. So I think that the primary goal is police accountability, but it's not the only goal of the pilot.
Just a quick, also with the pilot, Jack, if you could expand on this, please do. Part of the program, as well as the pilot, is that, you know, there's a lot of different types of camera companies and what they offer. You know, do we keep the information in the cloud? Do we keep the information, you know, at police headquarters? Who controls that? Who's allowed to, you know, as Jack was insinuating, you know, you come into a domestic violence situation, you have your kids on the camera, you know, who gets to fuzz out their faces so the kids aren't subjected to it. So, you know, Jack, if you can talk a little bit more about the different types of cameras that are out there, because, you know, the RFP, from what I understand, is due in early May or beginning of May, and when that comes out, you know, we'll be selecting somebody to help us begin this process.
And I think that
Before we do that, which I think is important when we talk about the RFP process, Josh, did you want to add something?
Well, I just wanted to go back for a second to Shakia and Carl's initial point about the voluntary. Because it would be, it's my impression, but just my impression, from conversations with the police and the social justice task force, that I didn't hear a lot of support for an ultimate body camera program that was voluntary. So that ultimately it would have to be everybody gets told you're wearing a body camera, because that's for everyone, if that's how it proves out. But in a pilot, without collective bargaining, you've got to go with who volunteers, and then you've got to understand the limits of the data that you've collected. And so a lot of it's going to be relatively operational. So in New York, they had a little problem with the officers turning the cameras on. And so I get the sense that our people were a little surprised by that, and I'd be surprised if that happens here. But I think that we have to be realistic in that regard, with the thought that it's all a prelude to a mandatory comprehensive body camera usage, assuming that everybody still is on board for that after the pilot.
That's helpful, thank you.
And that's why you're in the task force.
And just, I think one of the things you alluded to was collective bargaining. And I don't know if anybody can say anything about if you know what the commission's position is.
I don't know now, I just know that at some point, it's something that we're going to have to collectively bargain.
So the city council, we don't sit in the bargaining unit, unfortunately. We just get the final product, which sometimes we like, sometimes we don't. But that's something that's going on with the city and the bargaining units and the different, patrolmen, superior officers.
And maybe we could just follow up on the question about the different cameras. I think that the RFP is looking for at least 2 different vendors to be able to compare. I mean, Boston's really trying to do this in a thoughtful way. What's is least expensive and most effective, different types of technologies, because some communities just rolled them out and then gotten into all these questions afterwards, and that becomes difficult. So we're really trying to figure out, all right, this is going to be expensive. When it rolls out to 22,000 plus officers, it's going to be expensive. So the question is how to best do it so that the quality is high, we can see the stuff on the videos that we want to see, and that we can do it in a way that's reasonably expensive. Well,
Sure. Hi, my name is John Daly. I'm the IT director. My area on this is, on the business and the technology side. As Jack said, this is can be potentially a very expensive project. It also potentially can have impact on day-to-day operations, officer safety, things like that. So we want to make sure that we implement the best solution. And to do that, we're going to do sort of a bake-off approach where we put out an RFP for multiple vendors to come in. We'll look at the different sort of process models each one offers. We'll look at the technology, the storage options and things like that. We'll look at how they will impact operations. We'll look at, how they potentially could have long-term funding implications. And so once we decide on a couple of vendors to sort of make those comparisons, then we'll do the pilot, and at the end of the pilot, we'll assess, in addition to the things that we've talked about already, the business part of it, the financials, the operational and process issues. So we expect to get that done, in the next 6 months.
I want to quickly just take a moment, so I know Rep. Holmes is here, not only as individual capacity, representing Holmes, but also on behalf of the Black and Latino Caucus. If you want to say a word on the budget season or the Hyde Park Resilience, so many could not be here, including Rep. Malia, who would have been here but for budget season. If you want to say a couple of words.
Sure. I was just going to say, we do not anticipate, in the Black Latino Caucus, we're not anticipating a volunteer program in the end. So the pilot to me is really a proof of concept. And so the caucus believes strongly we should have body cameras. And so when you see how body cameras have happened across the country, people say, well, do they work? For us, working is when you see Rialto, you see complaints go down 90%. So the interaction between the police and constituents, when that drops 90%, that to us defines working. And so when the question becomes whether or not this is just about police interaction, one of the other things we've seen as the chief and others, we've had meetings where after unfortunate incidents, we'll go out and look at what happened. And unfortunately, we're looking at churches giving us cameras, people with their homes providing data. And in one incident, we actually had police with their camera out taping the folks who were having a challenge and the people who they were challenging taping the police. And so who handles that data? Who has control of that? We want a protocol. We want a systematic protocol, when it turns off, when it turns on. And then, I'm still saying that I know part of this initial rollout is it's going to not be with the folks who are undercover. Well, some of the problems I have is if you have 4 people rolling up in the car, those are the interactions that I'm most concerned about when people are being thrown on the street. and sit on the curb. And so I definitely want the folks who, if they're not on the cover, but the folks who are drug units, gang units, to definitely have a camera on, because those interactions are what concerns us most. And so I was actually trying to reach Rashawn on my way here, because there's been a question around whether or not you need two-party consent. I know the ACLU had some questions, and then we have some questions. I can tell you, as part of the budget process right now, I still threw it in there, because I'm saying, if you want to roll this out by May, June, then if the two-party consent piece has to be answered, let's at least try to see what the case is. So, Rashawn, you have a message on your voicemail.
Oh, no, that's what that is?
Yeah, so I just need to make sure, because we have the question. So whatever you need at the state level, the caucus is unanimous in that we think that this is something that we should roll with as quickly as possible.
And thank you. And so, two-party consent, we're going to talk about that. But I will say, thank you for being here, and why it's important that you're here and that others who couldn't come express their sort of apology because of the budget season is that this also connects to state issues, particularly some of the legal stuff. And I know BP has a lawyer here, and we have lawyers in the room, but particularly as we get into legal questions, sometimes it may actually require changing certain state laws. And so the committee is working jointly, not just with the city, but also with the State House. And even we had an informational meeting with the Judiciary Committee, and Brownsburg even raised some thoughts I never even thought about, that we should probably consider rolling out the pilot program. So all this stuff, we're taking notes to bring back and inform the conversation. So thank you.
And the one point, just one quick, one of the things that the Social Justice Task Force did was to say it has to be on the gang unit and the drug unit, that's got to be part of the pilot, for the same reasons that you articulated. You know, people who generate lots of FIOs, that's one of the people we want to have involved in this. So that was part of the Justice Task Force. Sorry, Mr.
Not a problem. So Rasan Hall, I'm the director of the Racial Justice Project for the American Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts. This term two-party consent, it relates to recordings of individuals. And so in some states, one-party consent is what they have. If one party consents to being recorded, then that's all you need. So I can have a conversation with someone. I have consented to the recording, and so whatever gets captured on that recording, even if the other person doesn't know it, is fine. Some states are two-party consent where both parties need to consent to being recorded. It's a problem for Massachusetts because we're not necessarily either. And I say that because we have what's called the wiretap statute, which prohibits secret recordings of individuals. And so that could be prevented, or that's a problem where, you could say Massachusetts is a two-party state or a two-party consent state, but what if there are 3 or 4 parties? The prohibition is against secret recordings. And so as it relates to body-worn cameras, as long as the officers are notifying individuals and they're not doing it surreptitiously or secretly, that obviates the concern around whether or not it's one party or two parties.
So I'll just end, I know I have to run back to State House, but I'm going to say to the point, you have a certain sense of privacy in your own home. Like, so you don't want folks to walk through the home with the camera and then all of a sudden, as someone is reviewing the data later, they see something that they didn't actually see naturally, or there was some drugs up in the city in someplace. And with that natural piece of privacy, does that mean that you need two-party consent at that point? But my concern is, if I'm following someone, I'm chasing someone, I don't have time to say to them, hey, can I record you?
Right, because you're not doing it secretly. And the other problem is, like, that's already happening now anyway. So to the extent that there's this concern that officers will now be prosecuted for violating the wiretap statute, it's not happening now, and it's already being done in a way that's not being secretly recorded, and people are recording in the same way that they would record.
So that's a concern. ACLU's position has been, it's already happening naturally, and it has already been happening naturally. As a legislator, I'm saying the wiretap law hasn't been updated, I think, since 1968, and so the wiretap law has all the other problems embedded inside of it. My piece of legislation now is to, quite frankly, just say that this is not an intercepting device, so that we don't run into the problem whether or not it's going to be an ACLU problem or it's going to receive. And so I'm hoping that does move, but I actually do have to do that.
Thank you. My name is Matt Allen, and just recently moved to Councilor McCarthy's district, so look forward to following up on this issue. And thank you both for do appreciate you both holding this forum. But my question is, and I think this gets back to some things that have already come up, I just saw in the Herald a couple weeks ago, I think, that the Commissioner Evans is against body cameras. He thinks we don't need them. It's a waste of money. And so I think that's maybe why some folks are concerned about what is this pilot program going to find. Is it going to be geared to perhaps support the Commissioner's conclusion that we don't need body cameras and that will be the end of it? But what I'm hearing today from the panel is that pilot program is actually to look at some discrete policy issues. And we're definitely going to have the full program, so don't worry. So I'm wondering which is the case, and can we get a commitment today that it is correct that the pilot program, regardless of how it comes out, we are going to move to a full program, or is this pilot program to actually determine if we should have a full program or not?
Well, I support the body cameras. And I think not everyone at the council, not everyone in the BPD, not everyone in the community supports it. I think for me, it's if we don't get the pilot program right, it can jeopardize sort of having a final program. I think the purpose of these meetings and the purpose of these conversations, and I want them to be robust, is to generate some report, some data that says, in the city of Boston, body cameras work for these reasons. I think right now we're looking at data nationally from other states, other municipalities, saying body cameras when used have this result, misconduct cases go down, other things. So I think right now it's starting with the pilot program and going from there. I don't always agree with the commissioner. I know one thing he supports, as well as BPD, supports this process and having a robust process. He also doesn't have all the answers. So as chair of the Public Safety and Criminal Justice Committee and Vice Chair McCarthy, our goal is to take back all this information from our residents as well, so I'm happy that you're here, and to inform these conversations going forward.
I think you've heard from the task force that, these are people of integrity, and they're not going to be spending their time unless they think that this is a process that is honest. And that's the way we believe, that the results of this are going to determine. And if the people of the city of Boston, at the end of it, get our report from the task force and say it's not necessary in Boston, then now will be a decision that the people make. But it's got to become a serious evaluation, laying out the strengths, the weaknesses, the costs, the benefits of what the pilot showed us.
This sort of picks up on the question you asked earlier too. I think, I'm a member of the task force, and so we don't vote or anything like that. But if you had asked me personally, my position on body cameras, say a year ago, I would have said probably not, no, right? But because of what the pressure from the community, because of seeing how helpful having, we got lucky and we had footage of things that have happened, I've changed my position. So I'm yes on body cameras. And I think that's part of what this process is doing. I think my sense of where the department was, certainly where the commissioner was, maybe the mayor was where I was. But because of all of the activity and again, what our experience has been, the position is shifted.
I just want to say, I really support everything that you guys are doing. So in the pilot program, I think is the way to go. It's the best practice approach. Is what most states have already done. So from the standpoint of Boston being such a big city and such a major player in the global market, I think it should have it. One of the languages that I've seen with pilot programs is that it's clearly stated as officers participate in the program, but they're not going to be penalized or evaluated. I don't know if you have that language in there. And I do know that, Sivan, is it? And they really did a bang-up job. I'm the student that emailed you. They did a bang-up job, and their policies really align with a lot of your national policies, California, Arizona, so on and so on. So I really applaud the effort, and I think it is the right way to go for us as a city. One of my concerns, and I just want to say this, as I've done my research, there are 5 other municipalities that are doing a pilot, that are also conducting a pilot program. And then there's a state legislator that's putting together a policy. And when I spoke with the legislator, it seems that they were not in sync with the activities of the municipalities, nor were they in sync with the good work that the social justice groups are doing. And so it just concerns me because one of the best practice approaches is that you bring the stakeholders together. And so
That's why we're here.
That's right.
Okay, all right, okay.
That's why we're here.
This is a best practice, and it's not something that every place does. It's to go to the community and see what the concerns are. And this is the beginning part of that.
Again, thank you for all of this. I'm sorry for my tardiness. I missed why the commissioner couldn't be here because I thought it would have been great to have been able to ask him some of these questions. And so one of my questions is concerning the policy, because I think that's the most important piece for this. I know that VPCAT and some other organizations are for the pilot, but not before policy is initiated. And so one of the comments you made was that the point of the program is to determine what should be in the policy. So my first question is, does this, I don't know if you suggested this to the commissioner, if his intentions are to put policy in place while the pilot is running, or everyone is free to do what they want, and then after the program is when we develop policy. And the second question is just to put everything out there. The rep was here, and I appreciated his comments and his support. One of the things is that the state government actually has put aside $275,000 for pilot programs in the state. And so I was wondering too if you knew if the police department had applied for these grants. Also, the Justice Department should be releasing a couple $1 million in grants for pilot programs, and if we were considering applying for those to cover the cost. Because I saw the mayor put aside $500,000, and I was like, oh, okay, but we can actually get this paid for if we apply for those grants. Wouldn't have to use that $500,000. So just one.
Well, I'll take the latter question first, and you can jump to the first one. So the intention of being and others going to the State House is just that, to make relationships and talk about the funding. The Senate budget put something in. It'd be nice to, we're looking at whether or not the House is going to put something in. So I think it's looking at what resources are out there and beginning to sort of compile that information, lie in my office, who you know very well, to see what is out there in terms of funding. So when we actually have a cost analysis, which we don't have for a full program, and what that could look like, we can say these sources of money exist and are available to us to apply as a municipality. And if you know of others, or if you know of specific funding sources, please send it our way as well.
I think an interesting point that the council brought up, Sue, is that with my research and who I've talked to in the industry, an interesting stat popped up that I didn't realize is that about 10% of the budget is actually for the hardware. All the cost is for the data storage and the processing and all of that. So, as that cost analysis comes out, I think that's where we're going to be spending our money. 90% of it to either have where it's going to be stored, and who's going to take care of it, and who's going to protect it, and that's going to be a big change there.
And I just submitted a grant today to hopefully pay for the evaluation part of it. So, I know they're trying to get different sources of money for this. And the other piece is that I know that another piece of it is that the pilot might be less expensive than we thought, in that the technology might be donated to be part of the pilot, and they're exploring that as a possibility. So there's different ways to try to keep the cost down for the pilot anyway. Your question is really important, the question you asked before about policy. There will be a policy that will be the result of these kind of conversations, your work, the Social Justice Task Force work, the commissioner who's been at our meetings and been talking to us about his concerns. We can't roll it out and let officers just do what they want to do. There's going to be a policy there. We'll still be evaluating it, in terms of whether it's working, the different ways we sort of outlined in the policy how they should act. Also evaluate it in terms of, if it says you can only be turned off this way, we're going to be looking at ones to see if it was turned off when it was supposed to be turned off, and turned on when it was supposed to be turned on. And so there will be a policy. We're going to train the officers on that policy, and then we're going to implement it. And then we're going to evaluate whether there's parts of that policy that need to be adjusted as it goes forward.
Just for adding to the sort of the policy piece. So for example, when they came back from New York, they talked a lot about when they turned on, volunteerism, retention, and there was robust conversation about the issue of retention. And there's talks sort of in terms of the policy being more lenient in retention, so they would actually retain for a little bit longer, but use the pilot program to test whether that's too long or too short. So I think the pilot program is an opportunity to test some things out as well, which is why we want to hear from you about retention and other pieces.
So there was just two quick things, and I have no more questions for the next 5 minutes. I think you should follow up with Shakia on the financial aspect, because she did a whole lot of research on where to get money from, because we understood that was a piece for this, that we needed to know how to pay for it. We didn't want the money coming from other programs. And the other part is, let's say we don't like what the commissioner and his staff come up with for the policy. So what is the process for getting that policy amended? I think a couple weeks ago, the Banner reported really greatly on this, where they interviewed the media relations person for the BPD, and they said, well, if the community doesn't like it, we should go to the Social Justice Task Force, but nobody knows who's on that. I mean, we know now that there are members here from that force, but there's like no list anywhere that says who's on that task force. So is there a list somewhere? Is it something that is public? Can it be public? And if not, what is the other process then for amending the policy?
Sure. Go ahead. Yes, of course. You've got four of us here tonight, and I gave you some of the other names, and we can put that up on the website as to where that is. You can go through me to sort of get information, and I would love to have a conversation, and have you come to the task force and talk about your concerns. I think that would be the right thing to do. So, I think we need to have a better dialogue about this, and, to learn the things that you folks have already started to develop and learn from that. We're not gonna probably agree on everything at the end of the day, but we gotta at least be talking to each other to try to see how much we can, where we can find common ground, which I think will be much more than that.
And why, just to add to that, why is it important that we start with these types of community meetings is, I went to one social justice task force meeting, and I was definitely like, who is the task force? And not everyone was at that meeting, so I think it's important that you know. But in terms of the process piece, so we have these community meetings. We have a hearing coming up next week at the city council on the 3rd. I envision we may need to do more community meetings. So, for example, I was talking earlier about Roxbury, we were talking earlier about East Boston. We may need to do more hearings on this issue. And I see the hearing sort of space at the council as an opportunity to go back and forth on possibly a proposed policy. That's what I would like to see. So if we have a proposed policy and there's something about retention, there's something about when it's on and off, that we hear from folks to say, I disagree with that. And at the end of the day, we explain, well, we did this because we heard all these different thoughts and we came to this conclusion. So we may not agree on everything, but at the end of the day, I'm hoping that the council meetings and the council process through the Public Safety and Criminal Justice Committee will also be an opportunity to talk about amending certain things before there's a finalized process or policy.
Who's the ultimate decision maker? Say 6 months is done. Is it the council? Is it the police commissioner? Is it the mayor? Who makes the ultimate decision?
I think it's ultimately the mayor, and obviously working with Commissioner Evans, it's ultimately the mayor. I think what has been proven in the past, even before I got to the council, is that advocacy works. Advocacy from community, advocacy from community groups, advocacy from other councilors, to push for certain things to happen. But ultimately, I think it's the mayor. But I think the Social Justice Task Force is going to play a big role because they will have recommendations about what they think should happen. Each counselor will have recommendations. I would like Council McCarthy and I, members of the Public Safety and Criminal Justice Committee, to also have their say in recommendations, which may align or may be different.
Could I?
Go ahead. Did you?
Could I repeat something I alluded to earlier? Because of the 6 months test program, and you have 100 cameras, if you could have 90% of them random, but the other 10 to the 10 most complained about officers, you get a different result. And we give you a better idea of the whole picture. Because I don't think with the voluntary people, you're getting the whole picture. And I think if the 10 people with the 10 most complaints, I think it would, they're the people that people want to have cameras on.
We can certainly bring that back to the task force and the commission, and there's no reason not to do that, except that the only rub would be the voluntary nature of it, of the pilot. But if they volunteered, then that would be a criteria for distributing.
At my union job, they put GPS in all the vehicles, and the union wasn't happy about it. And we didn't get to renegotiate, and anybody who tampered with it that first day was gone, was just fired. It wasn't a question of volunteer. If you have a voluntary, say you have voluntary drug test, well, everybody who takes it, they're going to be good. You know, the voluntary, you can have some other part to balance that out.
Did they put the GPS on your vehicle?
Yes.
Okay.
Two different kinds of GPS. We got phones that we're supposed to have with us at all times,
Right.
and the other was attached to the vehicle. One's the people who got fired were the people who tampered with the ones that were in the vehicles.
Because obviously, as a former public works employee, we install GPS on our vehicles as well. And I think that the feeling was there is that we own the vehicle. So we put a GPS on there if we felt that. I think, I certainly understand your point that it wasn't bargained for you. It's a little bit different. I think you'll agree that, the camera with audio, you're in a cruiser, and Lisa and I are partners, what we have a conversation, that in the vehicle is a little different than knowing where you are in the city, so. But your point is well taken.
I want to come over here. Oh, you're Vaughn. Try to get some other folks.
How you doing? My name is Javon Lissette, a 47-year resident of Mattapan in Dorchester. I'm a candidate for 12th Suffolk State Representative because Mattapan, presently Mattapan, Hyde Park, we underrepresented, Dorchester also. But most importantly, I'm speaking as a 19-year practicing attorney, excuse me, and a 5-year former Boston police officer. I know a lot of these gentlemen here, very good representative of the Boston Police Department. However, we have a see, there's always, anyway, Boston Public Schools, we have our good teachers and we have our bad teachers. And we're always talking about removing the bad teachers. In the same respect, we have very good Boston police officers. As much as I love Boston police officer, the Boston Police Department, as a former Boston police officer, as somebody who knows a lot about the policing, we're not number one. We should be number one, but we're not. And the reason we're not number one is for little issues like this, body cameras. First of all, we have, as so many people spoke, this study's been done, this study was done already by the ACLU, as well as, I'm sorry, I'm bad with names, as well as with Shakir and Sakan. This was done like a year ago. And what's happening right now, and I appreciate what Councilor Adrian Campbell's doing, and it's going to work. I believe it's going to work under her. I believe it's going to work. But the problem is, it's like now we're falling a year and a half behind. And just on, when I first got on the job, they had some kind of, on the motor vehicles, on the traffic enforcement cars, they had some kind of cameras. And I was like, but we don't use them. And when you really think about it, motor vehicle cameras, they're 30 years behind. And here we are, progressive, big police forces, just putting the cameras out there, body cameras out there. And the Boston police, after everybody's over doing it, we're talking about pilot cameras on 200 police officers. And now, come on, and I've never heard this before, we're talking about they're gonna volunteer. Let me tell you what, the department I work for, the cops who were pulling people over, sitting them on the sidewalk, okay, they're not gonna volunteer. So you're not gonna see that. In the community I'm from, the Mattapan and Dorchester community I'm from, that's the main concern. It's about citizen accountability, but I'm sorry. You always have to remember, the customer is always right. And the citizens, okay, they're the customers. So the police officers, we have to hold them to a high standard. And they are held to a high standard. So a big purpose of the cameras are for police responsibility, accountability. So how can we be sitting here today talking about they're gonna volunteer, and then we out of 2,100 police officers, we're talking about 100 body cameras. Perception is a big thing. And I don't know about y'all, but I feel like I'm being sold something over and over. The main sayer, the main policy maker of this is the mayor. These folks already met with the city councils. They had hearings on city councils, already regarding this. They already met with the police commissioner, the chief was there. Everybody presented their side, but the person who's going to be the decision maker, none of us have yet to publicly hear how he feels. And if we have a meeting like this, if the mayor can show up at a shooting, when a shooting takes place, and the mayor can show up, you know, and talk about the shooting, whether it be a bad shooting or good shooting, this is what we're trying to prevent, at least from my community, okay? So the mayor needs to be here. A lot of these questions we answering, we don't have police here. The mayor should be here, please.
Javon, thank you, and I want to chime in. So, we took the lead on this because it was important. The mayor and I, we have a good relationship. We understand, all of us, I think, would agree, we have work to do. That being said, we got there, I'm relatively new, but we got there, we said, okay, we're doing the pilot program, this has been agreed upon. Now let's get to work to doing the pilot program and make sure that we do it well. And what's the best way to do that? What's the best way to shape policy? And not just for body camera issues, I think for any issue is to get input from the public, particularly those who can't make it down to the city council, who can't make it to a city council hearing, who don't go to city hall. Getting lay folks to sort of tell us what they think, taking these questions, these thoughts about penalizing officers and stuff like that to make sure that it is considered, that it's contemplated, and that when we actually have a proposed policy, we also have a legitimate reason attached as to why something wasn't incorporated. So I'm excited for this piece. We can always do more, and I hear you. But I just want to say, we took the lead on this. The committee, the council, not the mayor's office, but we took the lead on this, along with the social justice task force members who are community folks. And we're excited to lead this conversation and this discussion and to continue it. And if we have to be that buffer, that broker, to make sure everyone's voice is heard in these discussions, we will do that.
But my concern is I feel like it's a conversation, and it needs to go from a conversation to action. That's what I'm saying.
I hear you. I want to hear, yeah.
I'm Phil Downey, I don't know, this gentleman got 5 years on the job. I got 80 years in Parkway District. I've been here 80 years. You advertised the meeting as a body camera. I haven't seen a camera. I know what an officer looks like. But the guy with the camera hasn't stood up. If you're gonna have a meeting, bring the camera, bring the officer and say, talk to him, let him see how he turns it on and off while he's paying attention to what he's supposed to be paying attention to. And not, wait a minute, I gotta focus on you, I'll focus on this, right? My question is, what does the union feel about this? The police union?
It's being negotiated now. So again, we're not, the city council isn't allowed to negotiate. So whatever is happening with.
This is being negotiated into the police.
Their contract is on June 30th, I believe, right? So it's being negotiated into the next contract, which ends June 30th.
But you don't even have a camera to show them. I'm
They
retired.
haven't even selected vendors yet, but I think that, I think it would be, I think every police officer here knows, they've been to Las Vegas, they've been to New York, they've seen them on other offices. BU has them, there's other places around here that have used them or piloted them, so. But I think they've seen.
Anyone there was on a negotiating team for the police union.
But I will add, so, and first of all, that's a great point. I think that's something that we can definitely do, specifically after we determine through the RFP process who the vendors are. I know Rep. Holmes left, but I know Rep. Holmes was looking at doing something related to body camera issues, probably post-budget season, where he would bring around a vendor or two who produce technology for many things, including body cameras, so folks could actually see what the body camera looks like. I think it's more useful, after hearing you, that we need to do that after the RFP process and after vendors have been actually selected. And I think it's a great point.
Can I make a quick
Yes, you
comment? Javon, just to follow up on what Javon was saying about, wanting to move conversation into action. As a new city councilor, I've only been on the council for a few months, it's incredibly important for me to be able to participate in this conversation, to hear from the community, because until very recently, I was one of the teachers in the classroom, not actively participating in this conversation. And I think that it's a very important one to have. I certainly appreciate your point about seeing the cameras. I've actually never seen a body camera myself, so I think that would be very helpful during this process. One of my, I'm on the record as supporting the pilot program. I think that anything we want to do as a city, to this magnitude, we need to study first. We need to make sure that it's the right thing. I will say, as a former school teacher, one of my greatest concerns is will, as a teacher, would I ever get one in my classroom? And I think that that's something that's very concerning to lots of people. About how big does this get? And where does the conversation lead to next? That's why these are so important to have. So it's something that's come up in the teacher community as a concern, and I think that that's why these are so valuable, these opportunities to talk, especially though, for me as a new counselor, I'm sure as Andrea as a new counselor, to participate at this degree of conversation.
I have a question for the IT guy.
We're raising hands here. Come on, sir.
I've been raising my hand for a while.
I know a few other people have, but go ahead.
I know. Will you be able to monitor any of these cameras in real time? No.
Speaking of raising hands, would you have a raise of hands of everybody that's not on the task force or in the ACLU or City Hall? Just a regular citizen that comes down to hear the meeting. If you'd have
The task force members only 1, 2, 3, and 4. Josh and Alex.
all these other groups of people.
I'm a regular citizen.
Yeah. And then there's ACLU.
Well, but I appreciate that point though, because I think the room is filled with police officers, city councilors, advocacy, who some of us are residents of Boston. And I'm not trying to run your meeting, but I think one of the things that's important about this meeting is hearing what the community has to say about the policy. And so whether or not there's a way to poll or question, what do people feel about when it should be turned on, when it should be turned off, how long the data should be stored, who should have access to the data, are there certain situations where officers need consent? Those are some of the questions that I would hope that people would ask about, or that the council and the social justice task force would inquire of, so that can be the feedback that goes back to the department. So the department, because my concern is the department will say, well, there were several community meetings and we took the information and developed this policy. But if nobody ever said, well, I don't think it should be on where, we're in someone's private home, how does the policy get shaped? So that's
So obviously we would like to see more residents here. We would say that about any meeting, even hearings down at the council or council meetings. With that being said, we have begun to receive that, and not just me, I think other councilors from residents about this issue, even those who could not attend, saying some of those specifics, whether it's via email, calling us, saying it at another community meeting. Like tonight, there's a civic association in District 4 that's meeting. People can't come here, but they're going to share with the folks who are there about what they care about. So we're continuing to gather that and to bring that back. And I would say on the polling idea, I think that's a great idea. And it would be nice if there was more than one community-based organization doing such a poll to get sort of a more robust idea of what the residents in the city of Boston think. And why we intentionally did this sort of community meetings tour is to try to go around in different spaces to try to get more people across the city of Boston and not just in certain neighborhoods.
I think an important point too is when Andrea and I met with Jack, and we talked about all the hypotheticals that could happen. We're partners. We're talking about somebody in a car. We say, oh, we've got to capture John Doe for whatever reason. Yeah, we got to get him. We're going to work hard, meaning that we're going to work hard to find him. There's a shooting 2 weeks later, and Anissa takes out John Doe. Can they roll back that tape and say, well, here she is. She said we're going to get him. So now we're going to use that against the police officer. Or something happens on the street, an informant gives information that's stored in the cloud. Can lawyers go back and dig that information up and incriminate the person who thought he was giving information, just between he and the police officer, or she and the police officer? So those hypotheticals have been thought about. We're running them over and over and over in our heads, and I think that's the importance of this pilot program. Is as we start getting down to the nitty gritty and this bigger program rolls out, I think we all know this horse is out of the barn. The cameras are coming, and it's how we implement them is just so important that we get off at the right step.
So we'll continue to explore the idea of a poll, because I think it's a good one. I also want to say, social justice task force members that are here, and some are talking about this. come from community health center space, clergy, other spaces where they're touching lay citizens, like regular old folk, who are also expressing to them what their concerns are, what their thoughts are, and they're also bringing that back to individual stories and hypotheticals and stuff like that.
Just a point of clarification, I kind of meant like older people in the room here who live in Roslindale, man. Like, do y'all think about when you're young?
Yeah, I will say, I got a lot of phone calls today from Rosslyn residents in particular who wanted to come to this meeting, but there's a huge Allendale Woods development, so a lot of people are out saving the woods tonight, so I know that there was a conflict well after we booked it, so you do have a lot of neighborhood group people who are calling us on a constant basis.
Yes, hi, my name's Cassie Quinlan, and I'm sorry I'm not a Roslindale resident, but I drove a school bus in Boston starting in 1976 through 1984. And I'm very concerned because I found that I learned, took me a while to learn how to work with the kids in my buses, and but I did learn, and they were very helpful, and they had a different style from what I was used to. It wasn't as quiet as I was taught as a little Irish girl, that everybody's supposed to always be quiet, but they were extremely helpful, and you know, colorful and fun. There was a lot to be learned, and I was wondering, my interest in this, I understand the legal issues are very, very important, and at the same time, it'd be useful to have it used for training, and so that's another purpose, have maybe some regulations of when some pieces are saved, so that people can do like a little quarterbacking, Monday morning quarterbacking or whatever, like Bill Belichick, and study the tapes and say, okay, we could have done it this way, look, this could have happened, so that, and also, and two other points, one is maybe if people are going to volunteer, you know, to wear one, there could be a stipend for them to volunteer. It might help a few people that were on the fence about it. And then I was reading something about, you know, a legal process, you're supposed to announce, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Announce that, okay, you're being filmed, you're on camera, whatever, that's a possibility, but I would think, geez, make the cameras a bright green or something like that, a lime green, so that everybody can see perfectly clearly, there's no confusion that somebody's got that camera. So there may be some way that it's perfectly clear without somebody having to tell somebody you're being filmed right now and kind of disrupt the flow.
I think the problem there is if I'm an officer in an alley, I don't want a bullseye on my chest saying, here I am.
Right.
So you do have to have them, you know.
Yeah.
That's, I guess.
With a little photo over it. Okay.
I just had a question. In most jurisdictions in the United States, if I were to lie for the purpose of having someone else be prosecuted criminally, I would have committed felonious perjury and would not have the right to carry a firearm. I presume, and probably wrongly, that for these officers, if they are found to be misrepresenting the truth for the purpose of locking an innocent citizen of the United States up, it would also be one and done for them in terms of their right to carry a firearm. Would that be a correct presumption? So they would have more than one opportunity to commit felonious perjury and keep possession of their firearm?
I mean, I'm not an attorney, but I think everybody have a due process to,
yes.
follow due process for the law.
So
you
if
would
they're
go through
found,
that.
But also I want to hear, instead of hypothetical, make your point. What is,
if
tell me what
a
your.
policeman report is inconsistent with what is recorded by their video, then in my eyes, is that, I guess you guys as policymakers, do you find that to be on the same ground as committing perjury?
It could be. I mean, I think that's a great point. And I think that's something, I just wrote that down, perjury question mark, under your initial thoughts about penalizing officers for certain things related to the use of the camera. So that's a possibility that we can definitely.
Are police reports written under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I can look. But it's still a point that is worth noting.
Are police reports written under the pains and penalties of perjury?
They are clear, concise, and factual. If we find out that perjury's been committed, there is a due process. There's an internal affairs complaint, which doesn't have to be initiated by someone in the public. We can do that. And that has been found in the past. And quite frankly, some of those people are gone. But
are they all gone?
Once that due process is completed, the officer has the right to dispute what we say as well. So it's not an automatic, like you say.
Dispute what's on video?
Excuse me?
They can dispute what's on video?
You said a report, sir.
Well, no, I'm asking if the report is inconsistent with the video, could they dispute?
Then if we find it necessary for there to be a complaint, then we have an internal affairs process. And that'll be looked at.
Is it one
But I
and
think the
done?
larger point is, taking that under consideration specifically for the body camera issue and the penalties as it relates to the body camera issue.
By the way,
I think
that's
it's
a
an
great
important-
question.
Yeah, I think it's an important one that should be discussed. Representative, you want to add something to that point?
Just that I noticed in the ACLU's document, the recommendation and the policy is to write the report before the season.
Yep.
Right, so
Yep.
that would be a
Yes.
way of addressing that. And then this is just a small, is the camera audio and video?
Yes.
Yes.
So I just had a quick couple of points, but I do have a question about the policy specifically. But I just wanted to go back to Matt's point about the commissioner's statements. And one of his statements was that basically because the numbers of shootings is down in Boston and the numbers of killings, because we don't really see a lot of police officer killings here in Massachusetts as a whole, that there's no need for body cameras. But I did want to just address the room that body cameras are a bigger issue than just shootings and killings. And aside from incriminating officers or incriminating civilians, they can open up a door to what we don't see every day between the relationship between officers and civilians. Basically giving us a look into police racial disparity within policing, and stop and frisk, even though that's not technically a law here, and things like that. Just in how tickets are written, how big of a ticket somebody's getting, depending on which neighborhood they may be from, or which unit of the police office of the police department is making that arrest. And it can show us all those small discrepancies that we can work on as a community together to fix the police department and community relations as a whole. I also did want to go back to a statement that she made in regards to the state and municipality being off. I was at a state hearing on a mandate that they wanted to put four body cameras, and one of the community groups that we work with, Digital Force, under Alex Matthews, he actually introduced that state mandate as he was working alongside us for the city mandate to the state. So they were kind of in conjunction. I'm not sure if they were considering an overall policy, but it was just a mandate at that time to have body cameras be mandatory in the state of Massachusetts. Now, towards the policy, is there a specific date that we need to have this policy in place?
So I would say it's flexible because, when I went to the social justice task force meeting and I said I wanted you community meetings, I don't want to rush you to a pilot program without having a process. And I think everyone agreed, not just the commissioner of the BPD, but also the social justice task force members. And I sort of knew that May wasn't going to happen because we were still looking at the RFP and looking at, BPD was having conversations with, Daley was having conversations with the state auditor, the city's procurement department about how you shape the RFP in a certain way for the pilot program so it doesn't create, bias or conflict if the same vendors apply for a permanent program. So shaping the RFP in such a way that it would address those issues. And so we just got the RFP out. And so that's going to take some time to get a response back to then choose two vendors with two different types of technology to use, to compare. So it's probably a good thing that it happened like this so that we could actually have these community meetings, have the follow-up hearing if we need more time. So it could be June, it could be July, but I think it's fluid, and I'd rather us not rush it.
And I just had one more quick note, I'm sorry. The Boston Police Camera Action Team, I was basically the forefront of the action team. And what we did was we spent 3 months of 2014 on the streets of Boston in all of our neighborhoods. It was a bunch of us from BPCAT. And what we did was basically community canvas. We went out, we just stood on the street, walking up to people, asking them, hey, how do you feel about body cameras? It is the next wave of technology, regardless if, we get them now or we get them in 10 years, they're coming regardless. So we picked up the concerns from communities all over Boston, and we felt it was important to get the community's major concerns. And their major concerns were the penalties for officers who violate the body camera policy, how long retention, as you said, how long it can be held, and if they could be incriminated if they were on the camera by accident. So if the officer came to you and spoke to you, but you were with your friend, maybe that friend got on camera, could they use that against the other person in the video to say, well, I did see this person at that crime scene this day. So we did rally up a lot of community questions, a lot of concerns, and things that our main question was, what is it that you would need to see in a policy when body cameras roll out that would make you feel protected?
Do you guys have data, outcomes, first the survey questions that you use, the amount of people you talk to, all of that? And do we have that? Because I haven't seen that. The policy, yes. But if you could get us that, that's helpful too. Anything to inform exactly what we're talking about tonight would be very helpful and useful. And if any, in particular, where you did the surveys and how many people you talked to.
Right. We also did a.
You're next.
I'm sorry. We also did a collaboration. I'm sorry, with the Boston Door Knockers, in which we did individually deliver over 600 letters to each city councilor from their specific districts.
I heard
written letters, signed letters from people within those communities telling the city councilors that this is an important issue to them and they would like to see policy that's just community oriented. So this is great. This is a great way to do that. But we did go to that extent to show that this is a community issue that people do agree on and they do want to see this. Right.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, I just want to make something clear. I'm a police detective. I'm an active police detective right now.
Thank you for being
But
here.
I'm not here as a police detective. I'm here as a citizen. I live in this community. And I didn't know there was going to be so many razzias, so whatever I say here, can I use against me?
Let me turn the camera on.
I work with...
But thank you for being here.
Okay, I work with Javon and a lot of Boston Academy parent sponsors. We've worked with them for a long time. I'm here as a, it looks like this train is going left the station already. I know when, I've been out of the city long enough, when people talk a lot and we do policies and just satisfy the voices. And I'm here more like a citizen of the city of Boston, okay? First of all, none of you guys can tell me all the questions that I have addressed about the budget. Please don't take me because I do a lot on this kind of work. I don't want to be on film.
Oh, can you not take it? Thank you.
All the questions about the budget, you guys have reflected that you're going to go here and there and there. It's not again specific how much this is going to cost. The cost is going to increase my taxes on my house. Okay? All my kids are going to public school. I use the services of the city 100%. Okay? My issue is, we have already systems in places where police can be held accountable for bad behavior. Okay? And this is kind of like the argument of the charter school. Okay, we want charter school because the Boston Public School are not doing the job, instead of holding the Boston Public School accountable for doing the job. Okay, and that's the job as an elected official of you guys, is to watch out the fiscal well-being of the city. Okay, this thing here is going to create an impact in the city budget. You're either going to raise taxes, or you're going to have to take money away from people. Are you going to take away the community officers from every police department, from all the stations in order to implement this budget? Are you going to take a teacher away like we fought this year in BLA to keep a teacher there, which we fire every year 2 or 3 teachers that we're going to lose? So these are the sort of things that we're talking about that affect our community in a greater way than what we're discussing here tonight. So what I'm asking you guys is to take into account the impact this budget will have on your policies that you guys are deciding here today. Because it's not just the pilot program, let's say $500,000. $500,000, we can have all kinds of things happening at BLA that we don't have. Okay, for my kids and Javon's kids. So we gotta be judicious about how we use our budget. Another thing that I wanna ask is, I know a lot of people here have a lot of well-meaning intentions, but we also have to, just like he likes like for police officers to use language, we mistrust people when they use certain language that we don't like Somebody used tonight, we got lucky in the last 3 shootings. No, we didn't get lucky. We had great police work that was caught on camera. Okay, it wasn't luck. No police officer decides to leave the house and shoot somebody and kill him. Okay, we got great police work. That person went home that night, and luckily we got caught on camera. So languages like that, when you guys want to convince the police to do things, you have to measure how you talk to them too, because we are human just like everybody else that you guys are defending here. Number 3 is community relations. Okay, I'm opposed to the camera for the simple reason is I come from a dictatorship. I'm Cuban, and I know what it's like living on the police state, and I don't want to give the power to the police state to do more than they have to. I'm a Democrat, liberal Democrat. That's if I want in the police department. So there's a lot, as you can see, there's a lot of stuff going on in my. So the grant programs that you talk about, the grants are great to start something, but then we ended up paying for it at the long run. You guys know that, I'm not telling you something new. I just wanted the community to know. The last time I was in the city council, all 3 of you said, and Ayana when she was here, and Wu when she was here, that you guys want to put in 350 more police officers on the street. You want 350 more police officers on the street, you won't be able to put this camera, you have to decide between the 2. You gotta be honest with the people, okay? For example, we try to do things a lot, right? Right now we have cameras going on all around the police department. Instead of using those cities as studies to see if we can implement a system here, we want to go out and spend money on something that somebody's doing that we can have the professor here go and study it and be cheaper for us. Just like the marijuana initiative, right? All the senators and state reps went out to Colorado and they came back and said, we don't want this in the state. And these are people that supported the marijuana legalization before. So that's the thing, that we want things, but we're not being honest with the community about the cost of things.
$36 million to settle police misconduct, that's 3,600.
Yeah, we're not gonna get into the.
No, they're saying.
We're not gonna get into that back and forth.
But another thing is, it's too late for the police officer. Hassan knows, he's a lawyer, we train him a little bit. We were training our police officers way back then. But he knows that legally, all these recordings have to be stored for a very, very long time. Because we're getting complaints in the police department that are 4 or 5 years old. If you don't have this recording, that's a loser case for the department right away. So if you're gonna start taking people, you have to store this recording for a long time. Legally, you know that's a fact. Legally, you also know that if you stop somebody committing crime, okay, everybody that's in the crime scene is part of the evidence, unless you blur their faces like the movies do, right? So let's be honest with people. When police wearing camera is different than a camera on the TV crew wearing a camera. And my biggest thing is, look, we have already ways to monitor bad police behavior. Let's hold the people that do that accountable for it. Impossible. If you don't feel that that's being addressed, make them address it. Don't create another way for you guys to study and to find out, and nothing continues to happen because you're not holding people accountable, the bosses and whoever is in charge of that, for that to happen. For example, Diane Wilkinson, when Diane was in the State House, she did the ticket thing that we have to log everybody's race and everything else. Other than no decent, they have a great database about how many minorities got tickets. What happened to that data? How much money we spend on that? I feel that this is the same thing that's happening here. And that's
one more minute.
Yeah, that's my biggest thing. That listen, this is a big. Let's not lie to the people. This is a big budget thing that's going to create the problem. Let's not go out here and tell we're going to get it from him. We're going to get it from the schools. We're going to get it from all the police services that we're giving. We're going to get it for public works. Because it's going to come out. We're actually going to raise taxes. And that's just my 2 cents. And thank you.
Well, I appreciate you being here and for sharing. And I think we talked a lot about budget. It's going to cost money. We have to have an analysis of that. We have to talk about what sources are one-time sources of revenue, what sources are sustainable over time. So this is the beginning of many conversations, but thank you for sharing. I do want to go right here, and then after that, I want to take your idea microphone and use it. And have Jack do a quick sort of polling thing before we wrap up. And at the end of the day, I want people to remember this is an ongoing conversation. This is not the end. There's contact information over there for our office. There's email, snail mail, however you want to send your thoughts, your ideas, and encourage others to do the same. Please do so. Go ahead.
I just, my name is Rachel Idawu. My question is this: it took 1.5 years before there was even talk about putting this pilot program together. Now you're talking about having a pilot program for 6 months. What happens after the 6 months?
And I think that's still a question. I think there are certain, we talk about community process and we talk about people making sure they're elected. If they want a permit program, making sure they contact their elected, making sure they contact the mayor's office, the social justice task force, the commissioner. So I think it goes to that question earlier, whose decision this is. But at the end of the day, we know that advocacy wins, and we wouldn't be where we are if we didn't have advocacy at certain points. So there are people on the council who I think want to see a body camera program permanently, and there are others who are saying, let's do this pilot well, let's see how it goes, and then let's go from there. But I think it's the beginning of many conversations.
I think to that point, to the detective's point really, is that we'll certainly have a better idea of where we are in 6 months about the cost, about reaching out and seeing exactly how much is. We had our first budget hearing today with the CFO and the assistant CFO, and they presented their full budget today. And like the detective said, there's some gaps that we'd certainly like to fill, whether it's BLA or the Roosevelt or the Irving. There's some spots. Where all three of us, and Diana was here, and Michelle, we advocate for schools, we advocate for parks, we advocate for new fire trucks, and you're right, as this starts to spill out, we'll start to get a better picture of exactly how much this is going to cost, and then we're going to have to start shuffling some things around, and there are some budget implications to it, and I think that's at the end of the study is something that's going to have to be asked and addressed.
And we know there's some funding that's available to us, and we may know there's probably more that we don't know about. So we're willing to talk to anyone and everyone, and even on the State House side, there's possible funding on that side. So this is the beginning of many conversations.
Right. And I just want to remind people that I'm part of the social justice task force. I'm a regular resident. I work in the city. I've worked in the city all my life, worked in the school department, a probation officer, everything you could think of. And we are picking this policy all apart. We're not just making quick choices and trying to figure this out. We want your input. That's why we're going around the city, to get your input so we can add to our thoughts that we're coming up with. We need your input. So this is not something that we're just doing overnight and figuring out if it works or not. We're trying to get your input and trying to put in the best policy for this community, the city. So with that said, just, we need any feedback from you. If you could email Andrea or any of us, you can. But we're really looking at this policy every month that we meet, every time that we meet, we're picking this policy apart. We're trying to come up with ways and ideas, what we know the community is going to have questions about. We're not just trying to make this on our own, but we're trying to make it with input from you guys. So just wanted to give you that feedback.
And I want to turn to Jack, to be respectful of our time.
Sure. I following up the excellent suggestion that we had from our colleague. Just a couple of the big things that the Social Justice Task Force, the Boston Police Department is wrestling with are some big questions. And I guess we can do this by show of hands and also have comments. But one of the questions is, should the cameras be turned off if a police officer enters the house? And I guess the question with that is, the balance is that there's obviously going to be things going on in the house that isn't the purview of the officer who's been called and is going in to do a burglary investigation or deal with an issue. But by the same token, we've had incidents of misconduct by police officers within houses at a domestic violence scene or intimate partner violence scene. So that's the balance that we're talking about. So if I was to say, how many of you think it should be turned off at the threshold before anybody goes into the house? Raise your hand. Okay, good.
And feel free to
What did the study show? I mean,
That one is very different. Different communities come up with different policies. Some turn it off as soon as you come in the house, some leave it on the whole time.
But what laws like plain, what
And
Fourth
Phil-
Amendment law, I'm sorry, we keep talking about.
And feel free to chime in terms of a question, but we don't have a lot of time left, so I really want to, and I want to be respectful of people's time, that's just, so I want sort of to quickly do this sort of yes and no kind of thing.
Right.
Which is raise your hand, put your hand down, just to get a sense of what we hear sort of in the room and what people think.
And the qualifier there is with consent, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
There were no conditions put on it in your question.
Okay. With consent.
So, let's change it over. Should it be turned off in the house with consent?
What?
No, it's the reverse.
As a
Turn it on with consent,
Yeah.
that's the question.
Should it not be recorded without consent?
Right, correct.
You should be able to consent.
Should police be able to record inside the house
With
consent?
Right. They realize this is where the policy starts to work, okay?
Right.
So,
But if it
you
just-
walk into a house and they
Right.
say, I don't want, I'm recording, do you want this on? They say no. Incident goes sideways, what happens?
I think that,
And I just have another one. Suppose you have the recorder on and it's a domestic violence case. So these are things that we struggle with. It's not just, do you want the camera on? But if you have a case that is a domestic violence case, you don't know that till you walk in the house. You don't know what you're going to. So these are things that the task force has to struggle with in making the decisions.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
so let me go back to that question, now we can clarify what the question is. Should an officer be able to go into the house with the camera on if they have consent?
But one of the concerns would be when we talk about this two-party consent is, especially in a domestic violence situation, what if one party says yes and one party says no? You know, there's a lot of complexities, and that's why these questions are important. It's why this process is important, because it raises these issues.
Right, and so right now, it's just an idea of getting just a general sense of what the room thinks, understanding, of course, that we're gonna possibly have to carve out caveats. So if there's a domestic violence situation, if there's a young kid involved, or other things. So this is the beginning, and if this is an issue that you care about, please email us, call us, and let us know what your thoughts are related to that particular
Well,
issue.
the person whose consent matters, I think, is the suspect at that point. I mean, I don't.
So once again, we're gonna sorry, wrap that part, but at least from the show of hands I saw, is that people are erring on the side of if an officer has, when entering or coming to a home and coming to a threshold, and the officer has consent, they can keep the camera on entering the house.
Right.
That's sort of the hands I saw, and so that's useful. What's the word before?
Well, a second big issue is, should every Boston police officer have a camera?
We raise our hand.
Yes, raise your hand if you think everybody should have a camera.
that's kind of a loaded question.
The 2100?
That's
Yeah.
broad. When you say every.
You know, people who are doing undercover work should,
Yeah, no.
should know. But uniform officers responding to calls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can.
That's about 1,700. Actually, the 1,700.
You blow that.
Here's another place where there's a balance point. As you heard, sometimes a complaint might come in 6 months, a year, 2 years after the fact. But there's also a consideration of how long we would want ourselves to be being kept on video. So the question is, the average policy across the country is either 3 months or 6 months. The video is maintained and then it's destroyed after that. I think some groups would like to be quicker, and some people would like it to be maintained forever. So if we picked a particular time period, let's say 6 months, that after 6 months, all video was destroyed, how many would support that policy?
Just unless it's flagged.
Oh,
If I go in and say,
unless it's flagged,
that's it.
And anything that will be
Yes.
flagged is a use of force, a citizen complaint, you know, those are all things that are flagged, and they kept forever. Or arrest, and those are kept forever.
Question, how long do you have until you can make a complaint against an officer?
That might be changed, right? Due to how long we would.
There's no sunset.
But there would be sunset on the film.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, yes.
That's what I mean.
Yes.
You could file a complaint from past years.
You can.
Yeah.
But the film will be
But just to sort of get just a general sense of the room, you know, we say 6 months, just a general sense of 6 months. What do folks think? A year? Okay, no, this is good, this is good. A year and a half? Okay, 3 years, Josh? Defense attorney. Or even longer, or forever, some people can say forever.
Starting any lawyer jokes.
Yes, sir.
Quick question.
Go ahead.
Does the citizen have the right to ask the officer to shut the camera off before you come into my house?
That was my next question.
And the other part is, he stopped me on the street, he comes up to the counter, said, give me your paper. So wait a minute, you got a camera on, will you shut it off? Why, what's the matter? Because I'm Captain McCarthy's golf partner. Before I give you the papers, I'm gonna make sure you get the paper. We don't want that on the film.
You have friends like that.
Oh, that doesn't.
The rest of that says.
You want the cameras? No discretion.
Well, I think that's actually one of the arguments that they have. You know, somebody speeding down a side street, you stop them and you say, you know, what are you doing? You know, whether they know the person or not. You know, and Jack and I and Andrea talked about this in our brief meeting. Was, you know, does the relationship between the local CSO or, you know, your local tango officer change because of the camera? And it's a valid. Yeah, the tango guy. The tango car is the guy who pulls everybody over all the time. So, you know, in most, like, in Area E, everybody knows it's Ernie, Big Ernie, DeRocha, he pulls everybody over, and he doesn't care who you are.
Tango stands for traffic.
So, again, wanting to be respectful of everyone's time, and wanting to wrap up, Rick, you can talk. I see you all the time. But wanting to wrap up, I want to thank everyone for coming out. I want to thank you for participating in this. This is the beginning of many conversations, and I would encourage you, if you know others who have thoughts, ideas, and want to have input on this, please pass along our contact information. And not just me, obviously, all councilors. And encourage them to email us, encourage them to call us, write us. People write letters as well, related to thoughts and concerns. And maybe you don't have, you didn't speak up today, but when you get home, you might have some thoughts and ideas. Feel free to call us. And I want to thank the Social Justice Task Force and the BPD as well.
And I'd like to thank everyone as well.
Thank you.
So this is what we're talking about. We want to input from everybody, all right? Everybody in the community. There's no iron team, and the community to us is our community policing partners, so we want to hear from everybody. Each of your questions and your statements are taken into account, but that's what we want. In our first City Hall hearing, we said we wanted to hear from the people, not if you just represent this or that, but from everybody. Because you're not sitting at their tables, they have a voice too. But this is what we need right here. I don't think this has ever been done before. Before we roll something out, we're like, hey, what do you think about it? What do you think about policy? All of this is taken in. And I'm thankful because you folks are here and you're using your voice, and we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. One more, just one last, sorry, Councilor.
Yeah, everybody wants to go home.
Yeah, sorry.
I just want to thank everybody as well, Jack and the whole social justice team for doing and all the hard work that you've been doing over a long time. Chief Cross, and especially, you know, I do want to make sure that everybody respects what the detective had asked earlier, that if you happen to have taken a picture, you know, we don't want to see it on Facebook or anything else. You're not only jeopardizing what he's doing, but you can be jeopardizing his life. So let's just please be respectful of what the detective asked. Thanks so much for all of you being here.
Thank you all.